right, so now we're going to move on to building the wall behind this guy. And I'm actually going to build this wall completely through measurements. This is one of the reasons that I measured a bunch of stuff on here. And this wall itself is the same width as this, which is 4 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and carefully lay that out, which is 2 by 2. And I can also, let's just switch to using just a standard scale ruler. Sorry, sometimes it's hard to remember to talk while I'm doing things, just because this is something I tend to do by myself all alone. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this line to connect it. Make it nice and heavy so you can see it. And this is a nice 4 foot by 4 foot line. Yep. So the height of our wall, we are gonna go ahead and you can take a measurement directly off here and see how high your wall is gonna be, or you can do your math, but this is gonna be 11. That's 11 feet, because 10 is the smaller number where our half inch is, and 10 foot, or 11 foot 6, I believe, yeah, 11 foot 6. And so I'm going to do this. I'm going to set it on the 6 mark. And then I'm going to mark 11 feet. And I'm going to do the same over here. And then we can cut this piece out. I'm going to mark it carefully with my square. And now, before we actually cut this guy out, this is going to be the height of this wall with it glued to the back of this item all the way down there. So, actually I'm going to cut this out just so that I am dealing with a smaller mass. I like to have that smaller piece be the thing I'm dealing with rather than this larger chunk. And this isn't even a super large chunk, considering that mat board often comes in sheets that are 36 inches by 48 inches. That's 3 feet by 4 feet. So you start with a really big item. Comparatively, this isn't so bad, but I like to be free. It also means that I can hold these two pieces up and really see that they match in size, which is exactly what I want. So that allows me to continue checking up on it and keeping these things nicely laid out. Now I can use this print to once again transfer the square. I can do it directly by measurements, the way I did some of the other things. The other thing I can do is create a window with my window. So using something like this, I can cut in like this. And I'm going to make this kind of diamond shape windowy bit on each corner of the window. And what that will allow me to do is set this piece directly on top of this piece. And I want it to be, this is one of those moments where I'm also going to cut out top and the side. I want it to line up perfectly. I want my piece to be lined up right on this item, lined up perfectly. And you can see the edge of this piece continue through that window. So I'm going to line it up here. And so the edge here, the edge here, the edge here, and the edge here are all lined up. which means that if I take the edge here, that will line up with the edge of my window, and I can mark the corners of these cuts without actually needing to transfer anything or use transfer paper at all. Now remember, I don't need to transfer the frame around this window because I'm going to add that on later, but I would like to transfer the edge, the bottom edge of this molding. And I told you before, if you didn't have graphite paper, that you didn't need it. All you'd have to do is take some pencil, rub it on the back of your piece behind the line you would like to transfer, and then you're just going to do that same thing you did before, which is draw a nice heavy line with putting pressure, and when you lift it up, you'll have a transfer of graphite there. It's a little difficult for you to see that. I'm going to go ahead and reinforce it with a piece of, with one stripe of graphite there. And now that I have the corners of my window, I can cut them out. Now I could draw, you can't see that either. I'm going to carefully go over it with black. All right, now you can see that. So I'm going to carefully, I'm not going to complete the lines because I don't need to. I don't need to complete these lines in order to cut them out. I'm just going to take my knife and I'm going to push hard into the corner, pull it toward me. I'm not going to go all the way to the other side. I'm going to get pretty close, but I'm not going to get all the way there. I'm going to turn and go in a circle, always pushing into that corner and pulling out of it. I'm going to make my way around this circle. And when I do that, I'm being very careful to be nice and straight and get all the way into those corners. But I will go back around this circle in the other direction, and that's how I will complete the square in the other direction. Now, that does not quite look square. So that is off by just the thickness of my pencil. That's off by just the thickness of my pencil lead there. And I'm going to come back in and fix that. It can be a little bit difficult to fix a cut that you've made a mistake on when it's such a little off by such a little bit, because that little bit is hard to get your knife to cut. Your knife will want to fall into the valley of the cut you've already made. So I haven't gone back into this corner and this corner. So I do that. And this corner right here, I need to go back into. There we go. And then it should pop right out. Easy peasy. So we have a lot of our big walls constructed except for our archway. So this guy right here is a nice big wall, and this piece right here is 4 feet wide by 2'8" tall. So we're going to go ahead and cut 2 of those pieces out. So this right here, we're going to cut it in half. And let's cut it the other way first. So we're going to cut it 2'8" in scale. So that will be 2 feet 6, 7, 8, 2 feet 6, 7, 8, and I'm going to cut it in half this way. And that will mean everything underneath my ruler right now has a height of 2'8". And then this piece right here is a total of 4 feet. So I'm going to cut it in half, and then I'll have 2 pieces of the height I want it to be at. Whoop. All right, so these 2 pieces I'm actually going to glue together, because this is how thick I want this to be. I have a choice. I can cut the curve out before I glue them together or after I glue them together. I'm gonna do it after I glue them together so that they are essentially perfect. They're going to match each other exactly. And then when I glue these 2 pieces together, I'm gonna smush that glue around a little bit so that it has a chance to grab on. And I am going to match one side over the other because they don't match exactly perfectly. So I'm going to trim that to match exactly perfectly. Now all 4 sides feel like they match just right. So I want to measure how high this curve comes up. And I don't have that measurement on hand. And this is why having a print is really useful. So I'm going to take a square and I'm going to draw a new line right across the top of that arc. And I'm going to make it square to one of these measurements here. And now I want to measure the difference between that line and this line right here. And in scale, that difference is going to be 8 inches. So on here, I'm going to measure up 8 inches. Let's do 8 inches on either side. 8 inches. And 8 inches. Draw a line. Now I want to create an even curve that does this. So I can freehand it, just like that. I can just try and sketch that in. The other thing I can do is I can take something that is already an existing curve and see if it will match, which this just happens to match the interior edge of a piece of tape. That was lucky. Probably wasn't lucky. Probably the first time I made this. That's what I used to make it. Let's be honest here, but you know, might not be. So cutting a circle is one of the most difficult things to cut. One of the things you want to keep in mind is that just like any of the other cuts, if you cut toward yourself in an arc, it's going to be much easier than trying to cut away from you. You can't really cut away from you. So you want to set that piece in and try as much as you can to move with this curve, to kind of move your whole body with it. The other part is that if you aren't careful, you're gonna go off into either the piece that you're trying to cut or into your hand. I'm gonna go ahead and snap off my piece. Get a little bit sharper edge to cut with because that will be a little safer. There we go. That's much better. Now this edge right here, you can take some sandpaper too and smooth out if you feel like you need to make it a little bit more consistent as well. So now we have this piece here and we need these pieces here. And for these, we're going to do that same trick that we did with the cube, which is instead of making 4 pieces, too short and too long, I'm going to make a piece that is short by 1. Thickness is what I mean. short by 1 thickness, so that they meet together like this. So that means I need a piece that is 1 tick smaller than the width of that whole unit. And that whole unit is a foot, right? Right. So what I want is to cut something out that is 1 tick shy of 1/2 inch. In other words, not a 1/16 shy of 1/2 inch. So I'm going to, yeah, I think it's a little wide. Here we go. Something stuck at the bottom. And I'm going to cut a couple more of these out so that I can make the top here and the bottom of my column. So one of the advantages is that it's 1, 2, 3, and 6. One of the advantages to cutting out of map order, custom border, any of these items is that they are not technically going to be cut. They don't have a curve that you have to take into account. These blades are slicing and separating the fibers rather than actually destroying the fibers in between. This is a little bit easier for me to slide over than to do the math each time. So that's what I'm doing. Minus 1 tick. That should technically be right. So let's see what it looks like. So I'm going to cut these out. So generally, in my experience, if you're making large cuts that are just about 1 measurement on each side, or taking some of those things into consideration, and you have to take thickness into consideration, it's easier to lay it out with your measurements than it is to just try and use the print or any of those things to figure out how big something is. That being said, some measurements are easier to transfer from your print. So once I have all of these cut out, and that's exactly how much I want them to be, you can use any combination of measuring that you like. And one of them can be transferring this measurement from this guy right here. So I'm just going to set it down and then transfer that measurement onto this piece. So I'm going to cut across that line. I actually just have 2 pieces. I don't have a full line, but that's okay. When I place my knife down on there, I can make that pretty easily. And I'm gonna need 4 of these, so I'm just gonna go ahead and cut them all to be exactly the same size. Cut off pieces are going to be what I create the other side with. So I'm going to go ahead and grab onto this and line it up right here. And then cut it off. And I'm going to cut off another, I'm going to cut off a total of 4 of these. So here's our small piece, here's our large piece, here's our center piece. We have our stairs constructed, we have the wall for our stairs, we have our center wall, our door cut out, and we have our window wall. And now we're gonna cut a couple more of these support pieces and then start gluing things together. Once I have a slew of support 1/4 inch slices, I'm going to be able to go ahead and start gluing all and supporting all of my pieces.